You're working so hard yet still performing so poorly. It must be incompetence. Just so you know, Grace sneered, her voice dripping with mockery. My husband's getting promoted left and right, earning $200,000 a year now. And you? What? Barely pulling in $40,000? Spare me the jealousy and stop talking badly about my husband. I clenched my fists, trying to keep my voice calm. Grace, don't speak that way. My husband is doing just fine. Grace's lips curled into a smile. Oh, did I strike a nerve? Sorry, it's just the truth. Poor people like you tend to get upset over these things. I can't relate. My family's wealthy, so I just don't understand what it's like to struggle. By the way, invite us over sometime. I'd love to see how people like you live. Ryan, my husband, looked Grace straight in the eye and, with a polite smile, said, "Sure, Grace, we'll have you over soon." I'm Chloe, 30 years old, and a working mother in my second year of marriage. Right now, I'm pregnant and working remotely after making arrangements with my boss. My husband Ryan and I met in college. He's quiet and introverted, but has a heart full of strength. We got close while organizing a cultural festival together, and before long, we were dating. Our relationship was smooth, without any major arguments, and 2 years ago, when I was 28, Ryan proposed. After his parents passed away in an accident a few years ago, I moved into the house he'd been living in alone. His older sister, Zoe, who's a year older than Ryan, had been abroad for work but recently returned and now lives with us. Zoe's direct but kind-hearted. Between her and Ryan both being busy with their jobs, I handle most of the household chores, though they help out when they can. Life's not easy, but we make it work. One weekend, the three of us were cleaning the house when Ryan got a call from work. Some emergency had come up, and he had to leave right away. As he put on his shoes at the door, he turned to me, concern in his eyes. "Chloe, I'm really sorry I can't come with you to your parents today. Please call me if anything happens. Don't push yourself too hard." We had planned to visit my parents and bring some grapes that Ryan's boss had given him. I smiled, waving him off. "Don't worry, you be careful, too." Since my pregnancy, Ryan had become more protective than ever. I'd originally planned to return to the office after the baby was born, but he was adamant I continue working from home. Even that morning, while we cleaned, he kept fussing over me. "Be careful on the stairs, Chloe. I'll take care of the rest." It was sweet, but I had a feeling it would only get more intense once the baby arrived. After Ryan left, I joined Zoe in the living room. "Ryan's such a worrier, isn't he?" she remarked with a grin. "Yeah, I can already picture him telling our kid to be home before dark," I said, laughing. Zoe shook her head, amused. "You're probably right. He used to come pick me up from work if I was running late, saying it was too dangerous to be out alone at night." "Really? That's more than worrying, that's overprotective," I said with a smile. Zoe was a little surprised, but she quickly nodded in agreement. "Yeah, it can be a bit much sometimes, but hey, I'm planning to bake some fruit toast later. Let's have it together." Zoe's baking skills were top-notch. Her desserts could have been sold in a bakery. "Sounds great. I'm looking forward to it," I replied. I felt lucky. I had a loving husband, a supportive sister-in-law, and a stable life. But, of course, there were always moments that got under my skin. Later that day, I visited my parents' house to drop off the grapes, expecting a peaceful afternoon. Instead, I was greeted by none other than Grace. "Chloe, what, no Ryan today?" she asked with feigned surprise. "Grace, I didn't know you'd be here," I replied, trying to keep the mood light. "Ryan had to work, so I came alone." Grace smirked. "He's working, huh, for that small company of his? Leaving his pregnant wife alone on a holiday. Must be hard on you, especially living with his sister in his family's house." Her words stung, but I didn't let her see it. "Actually, Zoe is wonderful. We all get along and support each other," I said calmly. Grace wasn't done. "No need to lie, Chloe. It must be tough, living in your in-laws' house with a husband who barely makes enough to get by. You can admit it." Grace had married my brother Alex just 6 months ago. Alex worked at a prestigious company, and Grace had been his colleague. From the very first time I met her, she made it clear she looked down on me. I remembered that first meeting well. Alex had stepped away, leaving me alone with Grace. She'd turned to me, her smile cold. So, Chloe, where do you work? I'm at the same company as Alex. You know, top tier. That's great. I don't work at such a big place, I'd said. Grace had looked me up and down, dismissing me with her eyes. I see. Alex talked you up so much, but I guess you're not that impressive after all. From that moment on, Grace's attitude toward me had been clear. She was perfectly pleasant when others were around, but when we were alone, her true colors came out. I did my best to ignore it, but today, her words were especially biting. One day, Ryan and I had visited his grandmother in the hospital. She'd been admitted a few months ago, but with our busy schedules, we hadn't been able to visit until then. Grandmother, it's been a while. I'm sorry we couldn't visit sooner. Work has been pretty hectic, I said, offering an apologetic smile as we walked into her hospital room. Grandmother's face lit up with warmth. Oh, don't worry about that, dear. I know how busy life can get. I'm just so happy you both came today. The medication's been working wonders, and I've been feeling great. I even got to enjoy my favorite chicken dish again, she said, her eyes twinkling. That's wonderful to hear, I replied, then added playfully, just don't overdo it, okay? Grandmother chuckled. You always worry too much. We spent some time chatting, catching her up on recent happenings, but soon grandmother began to look a little tired. Her eyelids grew heavy, and we knew it was time to let her rest. After promising to visit again soon, Ryan and I quietly left the room. As we walked toward the parking lot, I sighed in relief. Grandmother looked really good, didn't she? Yeah, Ryan nodded, his expression lighter. It's nice to see her doing so well. But before we could fully enjoy the moment, a voice rang out behind us. Oh, Chloe, what a surprise. I stiffened. That voice could only belong to one person. Turning around, my suspicions were confirmed. Grace was walking toward us, her smile dripping with mockery. So, you decided to visit grandmother today. She always talks about how much she wants to see her family. I make sure to visit her every week. But I guess you've been too swamped with work. Chloe, working so hard for so little? How unfortunate. I felt my patience slipping. Grace, stop speaking ill of my husband, I said, my voice tight with anger. Grace tilted her head, feigning innocence. Oh, did I hit a nerve? I didn't mean to upset you. I'm just stating the obvious. It's no wonder you're upset. I can't relate to what it's like to be struggling. Coming from a wealthy family myself, I just don't understand how difficult things must be for you. Her words cut like knives, but I stayed silent, holding back the wave of frustration rising in me. Grace's smug tone sent a wave of anger through me. Ryan, too, looked stern, casting a glance at the scene below him. Grace carried on, her voice dripping with condescension. Oh, you should invite us over sometime. I'm curious to see how people like you live. I, for one, enjoy the view from my high-rise apartment in an upscale neighborhood. My husband earns $200,000 a year, and I'm a successful employee at the same company as— Wait, is it Alex you work with? She asked, feigning surprise. Ryan raised an eyebrow. Really? Grace grinned. Yes. Unlike you, we're both professionals at a prestigious firm. Before we got married, my dad bought me whatever I wanted, and now I live in luxury. But I'm so intrigued, how do poor people like you manage in such humble surroundings? Ryan met her gaze, smiling slightly. We'll invite you over. I think you'll be in for a surprise. Grace raised an eyebrow, clearly missing his point. Oh, I bet it's a rundown place, right? Can't wait. She flounced off, lost in her own thoughts. Ryan and I exchanged a look, unable to suppress a laugh at her ignorance. A few days later, we picked Grace up from the station. She eyed our house, her lips curling in mild disappointment. Well, this is ordinary, not what I was expecting. Did you clean up just for me? No matter how much you try, it's impossible to hide your poverty. Ryan chuckled, a mix of disbelief and amusement playing on his face. Grace, however, didn't catch on. Let's get inside and see what cheap things you've got. At this point, I was beyond anger. Her childishness was just astounding. Come in, I said, opening the door. Grace stepped in eagerly. but immediately recoiled with a gasp. Standing in the entryway was Zoe, smiling calmly. "Why are you here? This is your house," Grace stammered, paling visibly. Zoe's smile widened. "Welcome. I've been expecting you." Ryan casually turned to Grace. "So, you work at the same company as Alex, right? That means you know Zoe?" Grace's face drained of all color as Zoe answered smoothly. "Oh, I know her well. Grace and her husband are both my subordinates. Isn't that right?" Her words were laced with a sharp edge. Grace grabbed my arm, dragging me outside. She whispered, panic rising in her voice. "You never told me you live with the department head. Why didn't you say anything?" I shrugged. "You never asked." Her voice turned frantic. "Chloe, I'm so sorry. Please, don't tell Zoe about everything. If she finds out." "What is it you don't want me to know?" Zoe had followed us outside, her arms crossed, a cold glare fixed on Grace. "And by the way," Zoe continued, her voice calm but icy, "I overheard that you've been insulting Ryan and others, mocking their income, belittling them. I didn't realize you were this type of person." Her eyes narrowed. Grace visibly trembled, tears welling up as she stammered out apologies. "Manager, I'm so sorry for disrespecting your family. I'll do better. Please, forgive me," she pleaded, her voice cracking. Zoe sighed in frustration. "You're apologizing to the wrong people." Grace turned to us, offering a shaky apology, but it felt hollow, her words nothing more than a desperate attempt to save face. "Zoe, Ryan," and I stood silently, unimpressed. "Do you even mean it?" I asked coldly. Grace's tone shifted defensively. "I am sorry. I realize I did something wrong, okay? You should stop making this worse." She was about to lash out further when it hit her. She was in no position to talk back. She froze, her face ashen, beads of sweat forming on her forehead. Zoe shook her head in disappointment. "I'm honestly disgusted. I had high hopes for you. You're good at your job. But your behavior today? It's despicable." Grace collapsed into a chair, tears flowing freely now. "I was jealous," she sobbed. "Alex is always talking about how great Chloe is. I wanted to lash out. It made me feel powerful." "We're not your emotional punching bags," I snapped. "And I'll have to tell Alex what happened." Grace's eyes widened in terror. "No, please, if he finds out, he might leave me. Please." Ryan, shaking his head in disbelief, muttered, "If this is all because of jealousy, maybe Alex would forgive you if you really reflected on it." But Grace only hung her head in shame, her apology now a distant echo. Later, we told Alex everything. At first, he seemed shocked, struggling to process what we were saying. But as the full weight of Grace's behavior sank in, his expression darkened, and anger flickered in his eyes. "I can't believe you said such awful things to Chloe and the others," Alex said, his voice rising as he faced a cowering Grace. "You wouldn't have apologized if the manager hadn't been there. This is beyond disappointing." Grace shrank further into the corner, unable to meet his gaze, while Alex turned to Ryan and me, his voice soft with regret. "Chloe, Ryan, I'm truly sorry. I never imagined my wife could act with such cruelty." "Alex, this isn't your fault," I reassured him. "If Grace changes her ways, we're willing to move past it. We're family now. After all, it's better to get along than keep holding grudges." Alex looked at us with visible relief, gratitude in his eyes. His family, too, smiled, thankful for the chance at reconciliation. From that moment, Grace stopped mocking or verbally attacking us. Alex made it clear to her, if she ever mistreated others again, their marriage would be over. Since then, Grace's interactions with us had been minimal. She only offered brief greetings, staying mostly silent, as though reflecting on her past behavior. It felt unnecessary to push things further, so we all agreed to let it go. But 2 months later, we heard something unexpected. Alex and Grace had divorced. According to Alex, Grace had initially tried to behave better, but old habits resurfaced. She began bragging about her education and family background to junior colleagues, belittling them just as she had with us. This escalated when one of her coworkers developed mental health issues because of her treatment, creating a serious situation. News of what she had done to us somehow spread through the company, and she became isolated, working in an increasingly hostile environment. Eventually, her mental state deteriorated. She made critical mistakes at work and had a breakdown. She left the company and returned to her parents' home, where she remained secluded. 2 months after that, I gave birth to a healthy baby boy, exhausted from sleepless nights, yet filled with joy. I found myself captivated by his tiny features and bright eyes. The fatigue melted away whenever I looked at him. Ryan and Zoe adored the baby, and our home overflowed with happiness. One day, during a holiday visit, Alex came by to meet the baby. He hesitated at first, unsure how to hold him. But once my son was in his arms, Alex's face softened. He was moved by the baby's innocence and warmth. Alex, who had struggled with guilt and regret over his marriage and divorce, now seemed more focused than ever, dedicated to his work and moving forward. As my son fell asleep peacefully in Alex's arms, I couldn't help but smile. Despite everything that had happened, there was still space for healing, for new beginnings, and for happiness.